What is up, gamers? I am here with a new Duel Masters deck profile. We got a Darkness box, so of course it is a deck that features Darkness cards. Look at that calming, relaxing blue. I love it. Unfortunately for the opponents, this deck is anything but calming and relaxing. It's very stressful, very high energy for them. For me, it's a lot of fun, and I'll show you why. This is a Mykee's Pliers deck. So what does this thing do? Well, it's basically a fire creature, and its special ability is that each of your darkness creatures and nature creatures in the battle zone have speed attacker. That basically means they can attack on the turn they are summoned. Most of the cards in this game are balanced around the fact that they cannot just immediately attack on the turn they're summoned, even though they have very powerful stats and abilities. So the whole point of a Mykey's Pliers deck is that you run a lot of darkness and nature creatures that tick two specific boxes. The first is that they're good on their own. Even if you don't play the Pliers, even if you never draw it during the entire duel, these cards would be perfectly fine to play as is. The second box would be that when they have a speed attacker buff, they become insanely broken. So that's what the entire decision and thought behind what other cards go into this deck is. And now I will show you what monsters I have packed in this beast. Marrow-Ooze the Twister. This card is actually very low-key good. So he is a blocker, he's a 1-drop. He has one unfortunate side effect. When that he attacks a player, you have to sacrifice him after completing the attack. But typically, you're going to want to have, say, one Mykee on the field, and then maybe one or two or even three of these in hand, and just dump them all at once. They have speed attacker, and you're just going to go in for an instant win. Next creature is a set of Gonta the Warrior Savage. This deck doesn't always play fire creatures, but when it does, they're also nature creatures, which means they receive a buff from Mykey's Pliers since they fulfill at least one of the conditions. So Gonta is an all-star in the game. He's one of the best cards, in fact, and giving him speed attacker just makes him even more broken. I mean, having to stare down this on turn 2 is no pleasant experience, but then having to not just worry about, oh, he's gonna hit me next turn, but then think, now he's gonna just hit me immediately. That changes things. So very good card. You can destroy people with this, with or without Pliers, but again, it's just another card that gets better with that buff. After that is a set of Bronze Arm Tribe, another all-star staple of Duel Masters. Bronze Arm Tribe is really good because he lets you charge one card, and there's some bigger, more expensive creatures that I want to play later in the duel, and this helps me get to them, helps me curve into my important plays, and if it gets haste from Pliers, it gets even more better. So a very solid card. It's just an auto-include in many nature decks, and it is in this deck as well. Next, just a lonely pair of Pyrofighter Magnus. Because fire creatures do not get a haste buff from the Pliers, it's a good idea to just play fire creatures that already have speed attacker, such as Pyrofighter Magnus. Another good thing about him is that he is very difficult to kill. He will bounce back to your hand at the end of the turn, so that's very handy. It's very frustrating to kill him. You'll only really need 2 since you're not relying on fire cards as much in this deck, even though you do have a dedicated 4 slot for fire. Don't worry about it too much. Next card is Rumbling Terrorhorn. This guy is awesome. So he lets you tutor any creature in your deck, which means you can keep the beats going. If for whatever reason you did not get Mykey's Pliers, you can grab one of him. I have some other targets that I prefer to take with him, but this guy is already really good just at face value, being able to grab something from your deck and be able to summon it next turn. Next up is a tech card that sometimes you want to grab. So Photocide, he's interesting. He only works in specific matchups against decks that are very heavy on light blockers, but he's very necessary. And due to the abundance of Rumbling Terrorhorns, it's very easy to just grab one from your deck, unless he's stuck in shields, of course. And this guy being souped up with speed attacker is very, very nice because obviously Juliana, you can't kill it with any spell cards. You can't kill Petrova with any spell cards, but if you read the effect, they can be targeted for attacks, and this guy, he cannot attack players, but he can attack untapped light creatures. Depending on your meta, you might even want to play more than one just to make sure you always have him. Next, 2 more darkness cards. Galek, the Shadow Warrior. So he has a pretty decent disruption effect. You can kill a blocker, and then your opponent discards a card at random. Some people might prefer to play Windax, the Savage Warrior. I think he's a good card too, but ramping isn't nearly as essential as just having disruptive effects. So I would prefer to play this, and also because I have so many nature cards that I want to be charging for fire and darkness because I have less cards in those colors. So it's just more imperative to hit those instead. Last but not least, the most important card to grab with Rumbling Terrorhorn, and the most important card to boost with Mykee's Pliers. In fact, part of the reason I wanted to build this deck was because I was watching some Duel Masters Think Germany video where they were talking about niche cards that haven't had decks built around them, and they were talking about Mykey's Pliers, and I just thought, this card seems really broken in conjunction with this. Like, this just seems like a very good combination. And of course, if you know anything about me, you know who my favorite creature card in Duel Masters is, my best friend, my buddy. It is Cryptic Totem. 4 of these in the deck. So, what do I have to say about Cryptic Totem? He's dangerous. He's almost unstoppable. The only problem is, in a normal duel, you'll play your Cryptic Totem, and your opponent will read the text and think, oh damn, I need to kill this thing right now, or I'm screwed. And then your opponent will hit it with a Spiral Gate, they'll hit it with a Terror Pit, or they'll do something to slow down the inevitable destruction. Unfortunately, if you have Mykey's Pliers on the field and you play a Cryptic Totem, your opponent doesn't get that little period of grace to defend themselves or come up with some type of counter plan. They're just going to have Cryptic Totem punch them in the face right away, and that is brutal. That is just insane. Now I'll go into the spell cards. They're actually pretty interesting. So 4 Volcanic Arrows, pretty good card. It lets you just kill anything for just 2. Very helpful in this deck since it's very aggressively slanted, a little bit mid-rangey. And then if you're playing Darkness, you gotta play a set of Terror Pit. Just an amazing card, obviously. It kills anything, and if you get it as a shield trigger, it does it for free. And the last card is a trio of Dark Reversal. Now, I was originally trying to run Giga Claws, but I found that card to be very clunky, to not be so reliable, and the hand destruction effect just felt like a win more. You know, I would play the Marrow Ooze, Gonta, Bronze Arm, Pliers, Rumbling Terrorhorn. Through all the games I'd played, it was just a much more optimal play to grab the Cryptic Totem over playing the Giga Claws, because with Cryptic Totem, you can just win the game in one sweep, and with Giga Claws, you have to first hit, you have to make sure you don't break a shield trigger, and then you have to attack again. So let's just say hypothetically, my Gonta or my Pyrofighter attacks and then breaks a shield, so that triggers Turbo Rush, but then their shield trigger is, oh, I don't know, like Phantom Dragon's Flame, and they target Giga Claws. Well, nice combo there. Giga Claws is an interesting card, but the unfortunate fact is that it requires a lot of setup, and this deck is not really a combo deck. It's just a very, very annoying aggro deck, and I found Dark Reversal was actually a much better choice because this deck has at least one problem where if you get hit by, say, a Slash Charger or one of your things gets removed early on, it can be very difficult to get back into things. Having 3 of these is pretty helpful because if they break it, you can just grab something from your graveyard and just summon it the next turn. There are a lot of cards already in the 5 slot, and I think having some recursion spells is actually a lot more helpful. So, duelists, thank you for coming with me on this fun and amazing adventure. This is a pretty good deck list. I like it a lot. It's a lot of fun to play. It's really good. It's been really ripping up locals. A lot of my players in the metagame, they play very defensive light decks. So this is just a really good counteract to it because they do not have the time or the luxury of time to deal with a hasted Cryptic Totem, or Hasted Anything for that matter. Speed Attacker is just a very good ability, and this guy is very underrated. He's a common despite having such a good buff effect. If you like this deck, I'd really recommend it, and in fact, if you want to get this deck for cheap, you can get a proxified version of this deck for very little. High quality reproductions by Master of Duel himself. As you can see, this is a 1-to-1 replica of the deck that I own. These are with real TCG cards, as you can see. Well, these are proxies. I personally feel much more comfortable going to the local game store with a proxy deck, since Duel Masters cards are pretty expensive and rare these days, and even if I don't have to worry about my cards being stolen, I would just feel really lame if they got lost, and then all that money and time I spent assembling that deck and tracking down those rare cards like Cryptic Totem just go completely down the drain. That would be lame, so that's why I like to have proxy decks. They're a lot of fun. You can even give them away to people as gifts when they're new to Duel Masters and just help them have a good starting point. I recommend them. I'm advertising them even though I'm not getting paid to do this. I just really like the quality of his cards. Very agreeable person to work with, and I really enjoyed his services, so I'm recommending them to you. Get a proxy deck today. If you're interested in recreating this deck, but you don't want to spend the money to assemble these rare cards, then look to proxy services. These are just about as good as the real thing. They're high quality. For legal reasons, obviously, they can't be too accurate to the original product. In a game like Duel Masters with I guess I would say it's a dying community, since they aren't making any new cards in English. We want as many players as we can get, new players, people coming to the game and wanting to play, and price can be a detractor. So I'd say come on in, play Duel Masters, get a proxy deck, and just have fun. Anyway, gamers, really hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to make, honestly. I love this deck so much, so I'm glad I got to share it with you. Thank you for watching. I love all you guys. God bless, and catch you gamers later.